Okay, so today we're going to dive into something pretty major out of Minnesota.
Yeah,
Um,
this is
the arrest of State Senator Justin Eichorn.
it's a big one for sure.
Yeah, so just to set the stage for everyone, this happened March 17th in Bloomington. And the allegations are really serious. We're talking about soliciting a minor for prostitution.
Absolutely, and that's going to be a key part of this whole story, obviously.
Right. So what we're going to try to do in this deep dive is go beyond those initial headlines that everyone's seen and really understand, what are the facts as we know them now? What's the immediate fallout been like politically? And, thinking even bigger, how could this potentially impact the Minnesota Senate?
Yeah, because as you said, I mean, the allegations themselves are incredibly serious, and then you layer on top of that this really closely divided legislature in Minnesota.
Right, exactly. So we've been poring over all the latest news reports, trying to get the clearest picture we can.
Exactly, and there's a lot to unpack for sure.
Okay, so let's start with the arrest itself. What do we actually know about what went down?
So, from what's been reported so far, it seems the Bloomington Police Department ran a sting operation.
Okay,
And this was near Normandale Boulevard, around the 8300 block.
got it.
And the key here is that Senator Eichorn, he allegedly engaged with an undercover detective who was posing as a teenager.
Okay, so like a 16 or 17-year-old.
Right, in that range, yeah.
So it sounds like this wasn't, some random encounter. This was,
No, this was definitely a planned operation by law enforcement.
so they were waiting for him, basically.
That's what it looks like, yeah. It seems he went to this meeting spot expecting to meet someone he thought was a minor.
And then was promptly arrested.
Yeah, basically he showed up and officers were already there and took him into custody.
And did that go down smoothly, or was there...
From what we've seen, there's no indication of any struggle or anything like that.
Okay, so no resistance, no.
It seems like it was pretty straightforward.
Okay, so let's talk about the legal side of this.
Yeah.
What kind of charges are we talking about here?
So right now it's felony charges for soliciting a minor for prostitution. But it's important to emphasize that these are still allegations at this point.
Nothing's been formally filed yet.
Exactly. No formal charges have been filed with the court as of now.
And where is Senator Eichorn now?
He's being held at the Hennepin County Adult Detention Center while things get sorted out legally.
Okay, and the Bloomington Police Chief, Booker Hodges, he put out a statement, didn't he?
He did, yeah.
What was the main takeaway from that?
I mean, he really emphasized how seriously they're taking this.
Yeah.
He basically said someone of Senator Eichorn's age, engaging in this kind of behavior, there's going to be consequences.
Right, and he's in his 40s, isn't he?
Yeah, that's right. I mean, the main message was very clear. They're committed to protecting minors in the community.
Okay, yeah, so you can definitely see why this has shaken up Minnesota politics. I mean, what's been the reaction so far, especially from his own party?
Yeah, so the Senate Republicans, they came out swinging.
Really?
Yeah, both the Senate Republican caucus and the GOP chair, Alex Pachulia, they've called for him to resign immediately.
Wow. So a very unified front there.
Definitely. I mean, it seems like they want to distance themselves from this as quickly as possible.
Protect their image and all that.
Exactly. I mean, it's all about maintaining public trust, upholding ethical standards.
It's interesting, though, because sometimes in these situations we see parties kind of dragging their feet.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, historically, it hasn't always been this cut and dry.
But it seems like they're not taking any chances here.
I think it really shows how much scrutiny there is on elected officials these days and how high the stakes are.
That's a good point. Okay, so what about the Democrats? How have they responded?
Well, some of the key figures like Senate Majority Leader Aaron Murphy and DFL Executive Director Heidi Kress-Kaplan, they've been a bit more cautious. I mean, they've definitely expressed concern about the allegations and, talked about the potential impact on public trust. But they're also stressing the importance of due process.
Right, letting the legal system do its thing.
Exactly. They're basically saying, let's not jump to conclusions. Let's see how this plays out legally.
It's a delicate balance, right?
For sure. I mean, they're acknowledging the seriousness of it all, but they're also respecting the legal process.
Okay, so we talked earlier about the Minnesota Senate being really closely divided. So how could Senator Eichorn's potential exit, how could that affect the balance of power?
Well, that's where things get really interesting politically.
Right.
Because the majority is so slim, losing even one seat can have huge consequences.
Interesting. Right.
I mean, who controls committees, who sets the agenda, all of that.
Right.
So if he does resign or gets removed from office, it would likely trigger a special election.
Okay.
And you can bet that both parties would be fighting tooth and nail for that seat.
Yeah, it would be a huge deal.
It could absolutely tip the balance of power in the Senate.
Wow. Okay, so this isn't just about one person's actions. It could really change the whole political landscape.
No doubt about it.
Okay, so let's talk a little bit about Justin Eichorn himself. I mean, what's his background in Minnesota politics?
So he was first elected to the state Senate back in 2016,
Okay.
and he represents the Grand Rapids area. And during his time in office, he's been involved in a number of high-profile legislative efforts.
He's had his fair share of attention, hasn't he?
He has, yeah. I mean, there have been some controversies along the way.
Any specific examples that come to mind?
Well, one that stands out is he co-sponsored a bill that would have labeled Trump derangement syndrome as a mental illness.
Okay. Yeah, I remember hearing about that.
I mean, that really stirred things up, got people talking.
It definitely drew both support and criticism, didn't it?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, that's kind of been a theme throughout his career, taking stances that generate debate, you know?
So he's not afraid to wade into controversial waters.
Not at all. He's definitely made a name for himself that way.
And on a personal level, what do we know about him?
He's a husband and a father of 4.
Oh, wow.
Okay. So, you know, there's a human side to this story, too. It's not just about politics and legalities.
Right, there are real lives affected by all of this.
Exactly. It's important to keep that in mind.
Absolutely. So, looking ahead, what should we be paying attention to as this unfolds?
Well, the most immediate thing is what happens on the legal front.
Those pending felony charges.
Right. We need to see if and when those formal charges are actually filed, and then what the next steps are, you know, hearings, court appearances, all of that.
And will that happen quickly, or is this going to be a long process?
It's hard to say at this point, but it's definitely something to watch closely.
Okay, and politically, all those calls for his resignation, I mean, do you think that pressure is going to keep mounting?
I think it's safe to say yes, given how fast and how unified both parties were in those initial statements.
So we can expect more developments on that front.
Oh, yeah. I think we'll be hearing a lot more from both Republicans and Democrats as this plays out.
Okay, so for our listeners out there, what are the big questions they should be considering as this whole situation develops?
I think this case really brings up some fundamental issues about accountability for elected officials.
Right, like how much are they actually held accountable for their actions?
Exactly. And regardless of how the legal side of this ends, will it lead to any kind of broader change, you know?
Like in terms of ethical standards for people in public office?
Yeah, exactly. And how those standards are enforced. Will there be any lasting impact?
And then there's the whole question of what happens to the Minnesota Senate.
Right. As we've talked about, this could completely reshape the balance of power.
And that has implications for everyone in the state.
Absolutely. It affects policy decisions, everything, really.
Yeah, so this isn't just a local story. It has much wider significance.
I think that's a really important point.
Okay, so one thing that I find really striking is how quickly and forcefully Senator Eichorn's own party condemned his actions.
Yeah, that's not something we always see.
It makes you wonder if they're trying to send a message, you know?
Maybe a message about zero tolerance or something like that.
Right, or maybe they're just super worried about the damage this could do to their reputation.
It's definitely possible.
So much to think about. Okay, so just to sum up, we've covered a lot of ground here. We talked about the details of Senator Eichorn's arrest.
Right, how the sting operation went down.
Exactly. And then the immediate reactions from both sides politically.
And all the calls for him to step down.
Right. And then we delved into his background a bit,
Yeah.
you know, his political career, some of the controversies he's been involved in.
And we talked about the fact that he is a husband and father.
Right. The human side of this story.
Yeah, for sure.
And then we looked ahead at what might happen next, both legally and politically.
There's a lot of uncertainty, but it's definitely a situation to keep an eye on.
Yeah, big time. So as you process all of this information, you know, the arrest, the reactions, the potential power shifts, I'll leave you with one final thought.
Okay.
What does this whole incident tell us about the kind of pressure and scrutiny that elected officials are under today?
That's a great question.
It really makes you think about the environment they're operating in, you know.
Definitely a lot to ponder.
So thanks for joining us on this deep dive, folks. It's been quite a journey.
Until next time.
And we'll be back soon to tackle another compelling story.